Okay, good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, August 29th, 2023 meeting of the Elementary School Building Committee. I'll do a quick review of our agenda and then we will get started. Now that we have been called to order, we will have a public comment period as well as updates on public engagement. From an agenda perspective tonight, we have some meeting minutes to approve. We'll do a recap of our meeting at the Select Board last week. We'll review and comment on the schematic design report that has been prepared based on the comments last week and vote to approve it for submission to the MSBA. We'll talk a little bit about one of the recommendations that came out of the traffic study and what the committee might want to do about that. We will get some updates on permitting, which will also require us to vote to approve some additional survey work. And then we will discuss the public information process that will occur between now and special town meeting. And then we will adjourn. So despite the bullet points, I think it's a relatively light agenda, so hopefully we can efficiently move through it. First, as normal, we'll ask for our public comment period, but I don't believe we have anybody here for public comment. Amanda, do you want to? Yeah. So sorry, I meant to say this before, although technically you didn't get here before, so I was going to say this before because I had this thought today. So, Nancy is our designated representative from the school committee. Amanda is our designated alternate member. But what I realized today was you're not actually an alternate member, you're an alternate vote.
Yes.
So when we meet, please, feel free, whether Nancy's here or not, to come up here and participate as a regular member. So that's how we should be running this. Okay. Updates on public engagement are, we'll talk more about the go forward public information process, but since we last met, I have not received any emails or outreach from the public. I don't know if anyone else has, but I think this is probably just a factor of meeting every week that we're not going to hear from the public that frequently at this point. So, with that, we will move on to approval of meeting minutes. We have minutes from our August 22nd, 2023 meeting just last week. So does anyone have any comments or questions about those minutes? Okay, hearing none, I would seek a motion to approve the minutes of August 22nd, 2023.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mike, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Nancy. We are all present tonight, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And so it is unanimously approved, 5-0. Okay, next up on the agenda is recap of the select board meeting. So, we had technically had two meetings subsequent to our approval of the budget and timeline last week, but I think for most people, the school committee meeting happened immediately after our meeting, so it probably just felt like the same one. But with minimal questions, we got the approval or the endorsement for our schematic design proposal to the MSBA. The following night, we had the opportunity to meet with the select board. It was myself, Bill, Dr. Kavanaugh, and Susan Rothermick. We met with them for probably about a half hour, and Chris Eberly was there virtually and presented the budget, timeline, etc. We were there for about a half hour, answered their questions, and also received the endorsement for our schematic design proposal. General themes of that presentation, I would say the select board is still very, very interested in understanding the overall capital plan as it relates not just to this project, but also to all of the other projects that are coming online. We obviously are unable to answer most of those questions as a committee, but I think it just reinforces the idea that we'll have to play a role in driving the answers to those questions before we get to town meeting. They were very pleased, I think, with the amount that the number came in at, because obviously it was significantly below the projections at PSR. And it just encouraged us to keep moving forward, but I thought they were overall, for the most part, very supportive of the process. Anything, Bill or Carol, that you would add? No. Okay. I should say, one important unresolved piece of discussion from that was the select board asked about the special town meeting process. As of now, we still do not have a formal date set for town meeting. We are still planning to have it in early November prior to Thanksgiving. So that continues to be the plan. I will update everyone. I won't wait for a meeting. I will update everyone as soon as we know the dates of those, of that town meeting and the process that is required for the warrant. We won't have to do anything in that regard, but we'll just want to be aware as the whole process goes on through the select board.
A question, I know Election Day is the 6th or 7th. Is there an election in our town? that
There is
day?
not an election in our town. Yeah, so, because that was one of there was a point in time in which they were talking about doing it in late October so that they could then have the ballot on Election Day, assuming there was going to be a ballot anyway. There is no election in town on Election Day, November, I don't know, I think 6th, this year, so that we don't have to, to work around that at all. But again, probably we should say this out loud as much as possible. It's a good point because, again, this will require a town meeting approval that will require 2/3 of town meeting attendees to approve it, and it will also require a ballot approval following town meeting that will require a majority of voters to approve it.
John, if you can let us know once you know.
Like
I need
seconds
to-
after I know.
I just need to book out that space and then let the middle school know for the ballot day that the gym will be used for.
Yes,
For
yeah,
that.
I will let you know,
right.
as soon
Thank
as I know. I'll send a group email to the entire committee, letting everybody know.
Awesome, thank you.
Because I don't know if other people, but I've been getting the question of, so when's town meeting? And it's not helpful not to be able to answer that question, so. Okay, next is the MSBA schematic design report. Are you just looking for general comments, or is there something you
Yeah,
wanna?
no, so I'll go over that for a minute. And so included in your packet is the schematic design report. And what that schematic design report is the culmination of all the work that this committee has reviewed and the work that the design consultants and OPM have assembled throughout time. So I'd like to just hit on a couple of table of contents, just so everybody here and at home is familiar with what's in the report. But there's introductions, there's a lot of summary narratives that are included in that. The district's total project budget, we described the local funding process, but partly John just described. The final design program in terms of the program components that are in it, individual room types and the actual size of the building, the traffic analysis, the environmental and existing conditions assessment of the original Elmwood School, geotechnical reports, code, permitting analyses, utilities, soils, massing study, narratives about the building system, so that would be the mechanical systems and the components that comprise that. At this stage of the design, we're only at 30% design, so a lot of the design is actually in written form. With the next milestone after a successful town meeting, you'll actually see those things in drawing form. Also hits on the sustainability goals and guidelines of the projects, ADA accessibility. Room data sheets are looking at the individual rooms themselves, typical classrooms, specialty spaces, how those are fitted out with furniture. All of those things fed up to the construction costs that you saw. So you see the kind of tip of the iceberg, but I want the community to understand, and this report shows all the work that went into that effort. We also recapped construction methodology, where you chose design, bid, build with the general contractor. We've discussed at your previous meeting the district's reimbursement rate and the total project budget. And then on the second page, sorry. The two independent cost estimates, one through the designer, one through your OPM. A communications plan, which is kind of how this group is set up and the various user groups and who meets and when, how often. A project directory, a local actions letter, which is a roll-up of all the public meetings that we've had since February, which is our last submission to the MSBA. That's the bulk of what we call the schematic design binder submission, and then there's a rather thick appendix. And in that thick appendix is the educational program that Dr. Kavanaugh has worked on in the past, submissions, as well as a submission to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, who has approval authority over the special education spaces in the building, record meeting minutes, life cycle cost analysis that you've seen, geotechnical reports, surveys you've seen, the Mass Historic determination that there's no adverse effects of this project, soil reports, traffic reports, acoustic reports, and then lastly, the project manual, which would be the description of how to build the building in its current state, and then the drawing. So all that culminates in a large report. And this is the information that was fed to the estimators and then led to the estimates and the budgets that you've reviewed at your last meeting to set the total scope and budget. So that draft came out. We gave you Vertex's in-process red line reviews of Chris's first round of comments before he left for vacation. And I'm continuing to go back and forth with Perkins this week. We're going to fine tune it. And we're here tonight to solicit if there are any questions or feedback, and then ultimately get your approval to authorize the OPM to submit on your behalf, subject to any minor modifications that either myself or the chair make with the designer. Any questions on the schematic design report?
Okay, well, that was easy. You know, I think if people at home are surprised that there aren't more comments, a lot of this is sort of reversioned things that we've already seen and discussed, and this is really the well, it's not our work product because Perkins and Vertex have actually put it together, but it's the culmination of the work we have done, and so reading through it was just sort of seeing the validation of that. So, you know, again, thank you. I think I said this last week, but we have been on a pretty aggressive timeline to try to stay on a November schedule, to try to target a January of 2028 opening of the building. So I know this was no small amount of work to try to get this done in this short period of time, so we're very appreciative of that.
Yeah.
Jeff, I noticed, you know, under the final design, you had some footnotes. Are those things that we need to discuss or things that you're working through?
No, I mean, for this to go in, two things need to happen. I need to, you know, my office needs to sign off that it's complete, that it's checked all the boxes that the MSBA requires, and that, you know, we collect your approval to authorize to submit. So, you know, we're doing due diligence to vet it, you know, much of which will resolve, you know, before Thursday. There's very few items that would go beyond that. The first thing the MSBA will do when they get it is they do a cursory review. They have their own checklist. They say, you know, this is missing, that's missing. You know, if there are any items out there, they'll kick it back to us for those few items. We'll get them any supplemental information they may not find. Because of the voluminous of this, sometimes they can't find it because it's just, you know, it's truly a thesaurus size report, and so we'll just point out where it's found or where it's buried in various narratives. So a lot of times those are some of the initial comments that come back. I will say that I did note that it wasn't in Chris's comments, but I think they did a watercolor rendering of the project, which I think they took a little artistic liberties with the front landscaping there, and so I could talk to them about, you know, kind of dialing that back. But this is this image here that was on the cover where the building is accurate, but the boardwalk and the water in front is not accurate. And so just in case people download this from the website and we don't revise that, the foreground is not correct, but the back is correct.
That's probably true under that same final design program under inspiration. You see a lot of pictures of things that probably aren't going to be.
And inspiration is fine if it's you know, this particular image is presented as if it was presented. This one did not make it to your guys' packet. The first time I saw it was on Thursday when I saw the packet, and it is a beautiful watercolor rendering, but unfortunately they have a few extra things in the front that you guys are not signed off on.
Yeah, I love the watercolor rendering of the building, put the
Right.
water feature in front.
Yeah.
Koi pond.
Yeah,
I mean, like, if we find
Vegetable
several $1 million of
Right.
savings, then maybe we can talk about that, but yeah, I don't foresee.
Fish pond.
we'll talk about cropping out the bottom of this.
It could be wetlands replication, right?
Anyway, so I want to put that in there, and then a couple of things we put in the packet, we hadn't, something else we hadn't discussed before, it was the MSBA required a preliminary logistics plan. This is more of a technical document, but again, just in full transparency, I want to show it. You know, we talked about the first thing would need to happen is building the roadway off Hayden Row at 147, but there will be a period of time where they need to access via Marathon until that roadway is constructed. And then the 147 would be the main roadway into the site, and we would have our trailers and laydown areas, soil stockpile areas. The full site would be fenced in, which is this blue daisy chain that goes all around the site. And, we show areas where water, dewatering would occur and where infiltration will occur and where we would do laydown areas. So simple high-level graphic. Because you don't have a construction manager, the OPM and the designer will ultimately produce the final logistics plan. If you had hired a contractor, they would do a detailed version. So my CAD files are more limited than some of their files, but we will do a nice, clean one for when we submit to the bidders in the future.
And when is the process, when and what is the process to selecting the construction?
So because we've chosen the general contractor, we bring the project all the way to the end of design. And so at that point, you complete the design in 2026 at this point? Yeah, 2025, sorry. 2025, we'll complete the design, it'll be done, and then we'll put that on the street and we'll bid it to all the contractors that are pre-qualified. Prior to that point, we'll advertise publicly, we are going to bid this project, it's approximately this size, on this timeline, all interested parties, please submit your qualifications. The OPM will assemble a committee, it'll have at least 2 members from this committee on it, a member from the OPM and a member from the designer. By state statute, it's a minimum of 4. We could certainly have more members on the committee. We will evaluate their capabilities to do the project and rate them on a qualifications basis. And as long as they meet the minimum criteria, they're able to move forward and bid the project. Once you bid it, it's the lowest responsible bidder. So, 99% of the time, when they've made it through the quals package and they bid it, they're awarded the contract. The exception is if new information occurred in the time that you completed it, because it could be a 3-month gap between when you complete the quals review and when you actually bid it. If they get debarred or kicked off another project, or those things come to light, or somebody drops a dime on them about a project we weren't aware of, we have the right to evaluate that new information. They have the right to dispute it, or at least defend it, if it's new information that was received after the fact. But essentially, we would have done our due diligence, and it's the lowest responsible contractor at that point.
And the date on that again, ish?
It's spring of 2025.
Okay, thank you.
So because of the MIPA permitting process, we're assuming longer than a year. Typically, we'd be able to design the building in just over a year, and we're thinking more like 15 months with this project.
So if there are no other questions, I would seek a motion to authorize the owner's project manager to submit the schematic design report to the MSBA with minor edits proposed by the SBC chair or the project team.
So moved, sir.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mike, second by Bill. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? No. Okay, so unanimously passes 5-0. Next up is the traffic study recommendations. So this is something I've been holding on to for this process that I wanted to throw out to the committee. As part of the traffic report, there were a lot of recommendations that came through, and one of them was pursuing some mitigation efforts for essentially the speed corridor through Hayden Row. I have learned a few different options for how that gets pursued, none of which could be directly a part of this project. But I wanted to see, given that we kind of have our hands on the traffic report as much as anyone, if we wanted to encourage the select board to pursue those options, thinking that will make it better for our project to be completed and also, quite frankly, probably approved. So I didn't know if people were, what people's thoughts were on sending a letter to the select board with the traffic report, making that recommendation.
I think it's a good idea.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay.
Yeah, I think your report and the recommendations will serve the town as a whole,
Yes.
not just the schools. That's why I think it's important that the select board chime in and take care of it for us.
Yeah, and to be clear, one thing I did learn is that the options that would exist for that, they are the body that has to take action in order to do that. So, so if everybody's comfortable, I'll write a letter from the chair attached to the traffic report. I don't think, we probably don't need to vote. I think general consensus is probably okay on me doing that, right? Everybody comfortable there, or? Sure. Okay, all right. Then we're moving right along to permitting updates.
So permitting updates, there's two. One is that we submitted back to the Conservation Commission back at the beginning of June, I think it was. And their peer reviewer needed to evaluate the wetlands, and so we were filing an ANRAD. So that locks in the limits of wetlands. So our scientist goes out in the field, documents where the wetland boundaries begin and end, and then we submit that to the Conservation Commission. They use their peer reviewer to also go out onto the site and do an analysis and confirm, deny, or dispute, where those limits of work are. That has occurred over the course of the past 2 months. We were continued at the last two hearings. There's a hearing tonight where they're looking to discuss that portion of the project. I'm told by our conservation, our wetland scientists, that the feedback from the commission scientists is consistent, and so that the interpretations that our consultant had are consistent with where they think the limit of wetlands are located. There is a few additional survey points that they want located and added to the process in order to conclude the ANRAD. And so there is a $2,500 additional service included in your packet today to survey those additional points. We do have about $20,000 remaining available uncommitted funds in the feasibility study based on the other money that we put into past appropriations. So we would recommend moving forward with that contract amendment to Perkins.
Any questions, comments, concerns about that? So you need a motion to approve the additional survey work as outlined in the meeting materials?
Yep.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, motion by Mike. Is there a second? A second by Jagroot. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? Okay,
So the other permitting update is the building project based on the floor-to-floor height of a school and all the mechanicals that are in there exceeds the zoning for floor-to-floor maximum height or total height of a building of 35 feet. So we've submitted a letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals utilizing the Dover Amendment to explain that the reason for the height for our particular project is the educational use and the things that need to occur within the building, and that's why we're exceeding the overall height beyond the 35. The majority of the building is close to that, and there's a couple of appendages that are above that where there's a stair tower that approaches the third floor, as well as a couple of antennas that are on the roof. So we've submitted that application as of last week and are waiting for our hearing on that project.
okay. Any questions on that?
Okay. And then the last is just, I put a general update on the agenda for our public information process update. Now that we're shifting gears, the building committee needs to shift from the deciding factor of decisions to the information sharing factor. And so over the next 2 months leading up to whenever the town meeting ultimately gets scheduled for, it's the job of the committee to, share the information you've learned along the way, do it in many locations and do as many groups in town as you can share that information so that we have the highest outcome in terms of positive results at town meeting.
So to that end, a couple things that are in motion that the committee should be aware of. First, we've had a group of citizens who have, from various channels, reached out to myself or other members of the committee expressing a desire to help with the public outreach program. So I am going to be meeting with that group on next Wednesday to begin to organize them, help us with things like planning some of the meetings that Jeff is talking about, but also some general advocacy stuff. So if you encounter anyone who expresses an interest in doing that, please send them my way. Or if anyone watching is interested in doing that, please email. The second thing is, Carol shared with me tonight the full back-to-school night schedule. And so we will be doing something similar to what we did, I think, last year, which is we'll be looking for volunteers from the committee and others who might be interested to help stand at tables at back-to-school night. Maybe not just stand at tables, but actually engage with people as they're waiting in line. One of the things we'll be doing is putting together some materials. I think we've got a lot more interesting stuff to be handing out this year, so we will be working on that. I have reached out to, so in terms of town organizations, I have reached out to the Chamber of Commerce to get on their calendar. The Sustainable Green Committee is hosting a kind of a fair forum type thing in early October that they have offered us a table at, so I signed up for that. I know that Family Day is coming up, and I think we should have a table at that as well, so we'll be looking into kind of what are necessary for that. But I'm gonna create a Google document that will have several tabs, the first of which is events and organizations. So what I've asked the committee to do is anything you think where we should have a presence or an organization that we should be formally meeting with, put it on the list. Then, going real retail, I think what we're gonna need to do is start getting into breaking, maybe not breaking from the public, Zoom public forum, but doing more targeted discussions in areas. So Jagrut and I were having a discussion by email today, looking into, he's reached out to he's gonna reach out to the HOA at Legacy Farms to look at setting up a neighborhood meeting for that. So I think the more neighborhood meetings that we can do, so if you have a neighbor who you think would be an ideal person to host a neighborhood meeting between now and early November, now is the time to hit them up. And so the second tab of it is I'm going to attempt to break Hopkinton down into targeted neighborhood areas where we can start to think about how we bring those in. The reality is, for two reasons, we're not going to be able to do all of this ourselves. The first of which is simply one of time and resources, but the other one is, as we get closer to the date, because we're appointed members of this committee, we can't actually advocate for a yes vote. All we can do is provide the information about why the solution is the solution we want. So the more of those volunteers that we can curate, the more arms and legs we'll have, the more voices we'll have, and they are also freer to do a little bit more, yes on the school type of advocacy. So please look out for the link to that Google sheet, which I will send out later tonight. Please go ahead and fill it in. Please also look out for a sign-up sheet for the back-to-school nights and other events as we build them. So, the other tab that will be on the Google sheet is I'd like to open up a brainstorm of what are kind of the one-pagers that we want to have as handouts at these sessions. Some of them can be just put them on the table. Some of them, I know Bill and I have discussed, some of them can be sort of back pocket ones where if somebody says, a favorite is, why aren't we building it at 52 South Street?
Yeah.
Well, we have a one pager that we don't need to put it on the table, but we have that information, and so everybody can be able to say, look, here's an explanation of why 52 South Street didn't work as effectively or as the building that we're proposing. So any of those ideas are welcome as well. It's been a crazy few weeks for this committee in terms of the work that we've had to get done. I think it's gonna be a crazy couple of months leading up to town meeting, so I'll say in advance that I appreciate everybody's time and commitment to getting this, but I'm sure that everybody feels as strongly as I do that the hours we've put in and how strongly we feel about this solution, that we wanna make sure this thing gets over the line in November. Any other thoughts or questions about public outreach?
John, if the schools can help in any way, host anything, just let me know, and we'll book, space for whatever groups you may need.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. Then are we done?
Just a couple other notes. So the local action letter is something that gets signed by Nancy and Carol and the chair of the select board. So that'll be circulating around for signatures. Georgette has a copy of it. So I'll coordinate with Georgette to collect your signatures, and if she can collect Muriel's, that would be great. And I know she's going on vacation, so if it's not her, just let me know if you need me to
Okay.
drive out here and collect it, or if someone else can chase it down, that'd be great.
I can get it.
Okay, that
If you-
would be great.
If I get that from Georgette, I can get it to Muriel.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Do we also have to sign the special education? Abby Hanscom, David Browninger, and I believe yes.
Do you believe yes?
Okay.
Yeah.
We get on that.
So that'll, once I collect those things and we get, I resolve all the drafts and the edits and the red lines, you know, the package will be ready to go in on Thursday, and that's our deadline, so I have to have everything back by Thursday. The local actions letter is one of the ones that actually can drift out beyond, because they understand it. It includes even having our approvals tonight, so they don't always expect that one to be in on time, but the other elements that you mentioned, we'd want in there by Thursday. And then, so for this group, you know, our next meeting can be whenever you want to schedule for the purposes you just discussed about, you know, information sharing and what else is ahead of us. We've submitted the package on Thursday to the MSBA. They'll take probably 3 weeks to get back to us. I'm thinking somewhere in the third week of September, you'll want to have a meeting with the consultants at least, so we can provide an update on the status or feedback that we have from the MSBA. I will note that they are very busy with this particular submission. They, I think, had 7 projects targeted to submit on Thursday, so they might not be as timely as they've been in the past with their responses. So I was thinking to pencil in the 19th. Seems to land between the Jewish holidays. I'm not sure about the back-to-school nights, so we can check all that with Georgette and confirm if that is in fact a good evening to have it.
There is a back-to-school night on the 19th, but we also may just have to, well, that's an Elmwood back-to-school night, so that's probably a particularly bad idea. But we may just, we can maybe get together and look at potential dates in and around that area, because I'm just looking at the list right now, and the fact is, when you get to the second half of September, everything's a back-to-school night.
Correct.
So, so I think we just need to be targeted about where what timing we want to have on that.
Yeah, and for perspective, I mean, generally, all the comments that come back are, you know, 99% of the time, things that the OPM and the designer will just handle for you. There's very few items that need to come back for your attention, but there may be 1 or 2, so,
Well, that said, you're suggesting a relatively short meeting,
yeah.
so then possibly
You
even
could stack it
adjusting
with
the
other things,
timeframe
yeah.
of our
Yeah,
meeting
that might
into
work.
5 o'clock, if
Yeah.
that's possible.
It could even be
Well,
virtual too, depending on, you know,
Yeah.
the content of it does not require us to be present physically, you know.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. We could adjust the time, maybe even in either direction, because the
Yeah.
back-to-school night might be the kind of thing where what we really need is representation on the ground at the beginning.
And when do those start, time frame? What's the starting time, like 6 o'clock?
6:15.
6:15?
Yeah, so even if we did like a 7, we might be able to, you know, be able to do, yeah. Okay,
That's all I have for updates.
all right.
I have one question, kind
Yes.
of back to you, John, on your comments of, you know, the message going forward. It seems like, well, I guess my question is, do you have a time in mind when these proactive meetings would start to occur? The second part of the question is, we need to button up the messaging sooner than later then.
Yes to the second one.
Okay.
And so for that particular reason, I would think we would be starting them no earlier than the middle of September. Because I think we need some time to put together some materials. We need to really make sure we've got tight messaging and all of those things so that we have kind of what those highlights are. But yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. And then, I mean, I don't want to push it too far because the calendar then starts to get tight. So I want to make sure we have enough options, you know, to do as many of these as we can. Jeff, I don't know if there's things, are there examples from other towns or of documents, or do we just kind of know what they look like?
Sorry.
You don't need to answer that right now, but if you've got anything that is like, here's a great one pager that such and such a town did that we might want to learn from.
Yep, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
We can provide samples and exhibits and things that the committees did and show you things that the PACs did in those towns, so you understand the messages that have gone out in those corresponding towns.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay. Then, if that's it, I would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Jagroot. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Didn't think so. We are adjourned at 6:36 PM. Thank you, HCAM. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you.
That's gotta be right.